What's up, everybody? Welcome. It's Haberman and Middlecoff brought to you by Tito's Handmade Vodka. Tito's Handmade Vodka, that is number one. Numero uno. You're going to have some people over to your house. You're going to go to somebody's house, maybe for Thanksgiving next week. What do you have to have stocked? Tito's. What do you have in your hand when they open the door? Tito's. That makes you a great guest and a great host.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have a Tito's when you're eating Thanksgiving dinner and you got the 49ers on TV, so that's pretty sweet. Thanksgiving week, God, it comes at you fast. Time flies as you get older, but you know, I got a cheers, a special cheers for. I got a text from a couple people. Did you just see what happened? I said, no. What are you talking about? And then I get the clip of Draymond Green choking out a guy that he clearly hates with the passion of and the fire of 1,000 suns. And it wasn't just a chokehold. It was a chokehold and dragged him around the field or the court. And Steve Kerr was even telling him, let go. And he dragged Rudy Gobert, who is an enormous human. Well, he's not that heavy. He's probably heavier than you think just because how big he is. I mean, isn't he like 7'4"? I mean, he's huge. Draymond dragged him around like it was varsity versus JV, like a 10th grader would do to his 5th grade brother. That was the power and that the anger, the hatred he had toward him. I don't think he does that to any player, but cheers to Draymond, who makes an in-season tournament, which I hate to be the hater, which is just stupid. I think Adam Silver is awful. But if they suspend him, Draymond's raising awareness. Yesterday, not just him, but Anthony Davis gets in the fight. Like, Adam Silver, let's get back to our roots in the NBA. Let some fights, some animosity. Like, you lost that. Like, no one's watching James Harden. Do not suspend these guys. Let this action, this animosity, let the hatred, like, that's sports, man. You've lost that. You kind of got it back.
I had the game on, and the second that happened, it changed how interested I was in the game. Even though they lost Clay and they lost Draymond, I just knew.
A minute in.
I know. I was watching. I had it on. I couldn't believe they ejected Klay Thompson from the game for it. I've heard a lot of people talking today. I've been kind of paying attention. Like, what do people think as we're recording this? It's before the suspension gets handed out. So by the time you're listening to this, you might already know. In my head, I was like, 2 games max. People talking like 2 weeks just because it's Draymond. Of all the crazy things Draymond's done, this one to me was well down the list. He was breaking up a fight. And who likes Rudy anyway? Doesn't seem like many people do. His old team didn't like him. So
I don't think he should be suspended.
I will say this. Rudy had a line after, and I haven't seen it. I saw Tom Haberstroh, no relation. Haberstroh, no relation. From ESPN, I guess dove into the numbers, but it was behind a paywall, so I couldn't see. Rudy Gobert said after the game that Draymond tries to get ejected when Steph isn't playing. Haberstroh apparently went to look and see when Draymond gets ejected, and if he gets ejected more when Steph's not playing. So if that's true, that's an interesting little bit of shit talking by Rudy. That'd be interesting. But nonetheless, a toast to Draymond for keeping it real, John. Distilled and bottled in Austin, Texas. Tito's is 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly. How many quarterbacks do you think on average make the NFL Pro Bowl?
With the dropouts now?
Yep. Just the whole number.
On a given year?
Yeah. Just like what this year, how many guys think are going to be Pro Bowlers? Last year, I can tell you what it was.
There's technically 3 guys on each team, correct? Like there are 3 quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Is that the way?
I mean, it's changed, but I think it's, as I remembered, it's usually 3.
So let's go 11.
Yeah, 11. Good pick. 11 was the number of guys that combined AFC NFC made the Pro Bowl last year.
That's outrageous.
It is outrageous. It also means that the Niners may be playing a Pro Bowl quarterback this week in Baker Mayfield. Your NFC quarterback leaders in touchdowns thrown. Cousins, 1. He's not played in the game. Howell is number 2.
I mean, Cousins was on pace for like 45 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 18. He still leads the NFC in touchdown passes.
You're right. He played a couple weeks.
He's going to be starting the NFC Pro Bowl or whatever 7-on-7 competition, whatever the hell they do.
It was aging. Obviously, he tore his Achilles kind of immediately after. It wasn't that bad of a loss in the grand scheme of things when he was. If they would have won like 11 games, he would have been in the MVP conversation.
Right? Yeah. Sam Howell is 2.
I knew it.
Well, yeah. Hurts and Brock Purdy are tied for third most touchdown passes in the NFL. And Goff and Baker are tied for fourth most touchdowns in the NFL. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks I just named. Take Cousins out, there's 5 left. One of those guys, let's say, is playing in the Super Bowl, Brock. So there's 4 left. Howell, Hurts, Goff, and Baker. The likelihood that you've got Baker and Goff representing the NFC in the Pro Bowl, or some combination along with Hurts and maybe Howell, I don't know. It's pretty high. I was blown away. I was listening to some WDAE. I like to check in on the radio stations from around the nation, John. And one of the hosts today is like, I know some people aren't going to be happy about this, but I don't think the organization sold on Baker. They're taking a wait and see approach. Like, you don't think? So
we signed a 1-year, $4 million contract, and Jason Light said he called them. So what? Well, let's face it. One of the 4 guys, right? The NFC is going to be represented by the 49ers, the Eagles, the Lions, or the Cowboys. Like, those are the best 4 teams in the NFC. And
I think I left Dak out on that list. I probably shortchanged Dak.
I think Dak has like 16 or 17.
Dak has 17, so he's in there after Howell, actually.
So that group of 4, one of those guys is going to go to the Super Bowl. I would bet every dollar I had, my life savings, my home, my car, everything, one of those 4 guys. It would be the most insane upset in the history of sports. Would you agree? If one of those 4 teams is not representing the NFC?
Yeah. Yep.
Like Derek Carr and the Saints, Josh Dobbs, like who are the other possibilities? They don't exist. Seattle, I guess, but that would even be insane. That Pete Carroll gets back to the Super Bowl with Geno Smith rattling off victories. Is Brock Purdy a Pro Bowler? Like, when you think about it, there's 4 guys for 3 spots. Now, if you just a true Pro Bowler, like is he one of the 3 best
Pro Bowler? Dak, Hurts, Brock, and Goff.
With Cousins now out.
Right.
With Cousins healthy, Cousins is in first. It feels like Jalen or Dak, whoever had the better numbers, would just get the nod over Brock. Would you agree with that? Whoever wins that division would get the nod over Brock?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then he would have to have an equivalent season of the other guy, and I still think they just have the momentum. They've been in the spotlight a little longer. Even though Jalen's only been good at this level for like a year, he's been so famous for so long. Like, he's just much more famous. Do you agree? Like, just as a player than Brock, going back to his Alabama days.
Yeah.
But, statistically, they're basically even. So, because I think Dak would get in over him because Dak's going to end up throwing more than likely way more touchdowns.
He's got 2 more touchdowns than Brock right now.
But over the course of the season, that might be the difference of 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Right. And the 49ers, let's face it.
4 or 5 and same number of picks. Brock's got 1 less.
Beat him.
Maybe beats him again. If you play again, I don't know. I mean, beat him last year, although Brock didn't get the credit for that, rightfully.
But your Pro Bowl status is not impacted by the playoffs.
If Dak has slightly better numbers, but they're the 5 seed or whatever.
I don't even think that. I'm not trying to defend Dak as better than Purdy or whatever. I'm just saying this. We just know how this works, right? Like, the AFC starts with Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Burrell in the Pro Bowl, and then it has to play out. Like, I do believe like the NFC started this year with like Dak and Jalen in it, Cousins kind of on the fringe, and then Cousins just breaks down the door. He's in it. It's just the way. It's the nature of sports. Like, that's the way All-Star games work. Like, there are certain guys just in All-Star games, and you're like, is this guy like James Harden's no longer an All-Star? I'm sorry, but like for the last decade, he just starts the year as one, right? You know what I'm saying?
I do, but then what happened in the AFC this year is Tua got off to a crazy start. CJ Stroud's playing really well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Things change.
Things change in the AFC. Nothing's really changed in the NFC this year.
Well, Purdy's established. Because last year, people would make the argument, and it was fair. Like, is this going to continue? And then he's injured, and he comes back and through whatever. What's their record around 6-3? So through 9 games, got 15 touchdowns. He's on pace for 30 touchdowns. And they're going to do it. Like, he's just doing it again. Because he was a Pro Bowl level guy that stretch. But you got to earn it, right? You got to sustain it, I guess is a better way to say it. And he's sustaining it.
He is, comparing him and Hurts. Hurts is 1% better in completion percent. Sorry, 0.1% better in completion, 0.1% better in completion percentage. He has thrown for 18 more yards this year than Brock, so that's exactly 2 more yards per game. They have the same number of touchdown passes. Hurts has 3 more interceptions. Brock is higher in the yards per attempt, and obviously Hurts is, extremely. I'm not saying this to say they're the same player, but obviously Hurts brings a whole running element as well.
But he doesn't run as much as he used to.
No, he's hurt, right? Would you agree with that when you watch him? Like, he doesn't look 100%.
No.
Tell me if you agree with this on Brock. Like,
I'd say Purdy's been better than Hurts this year. Because, like, Brock lost him a game. Hurts lost him the Jets game.
Yeah. But they've also won a couple games where they did not have it going on, where the Niners have yet to, like, really win a game where they don't have it going on.
Yeah, they've played consistently in the 3 games the Niners lost, especially Minnesota and Cleveland. They won those games because kind of Jalen made some big plays at the end of the game, and their quarterback was the opposite.
Yeah. You gotta win with your beat. Like, let's see you go win when your team has a C+, B- game, and you got to go make plays at the end.
I would say the big difference between the two players, throw out the numbers, which are borderline identical. If you're an Eagles fan and you're down 3 points, or it's a tie game, or you're down 4 points in the middle of the fourth quarter, you feel confident with your guy. I think there is still some unknown with Purdy because we saw that spot, like, this is his moment. Now, he might have been concussed, whatever. He had another moment against Cincinnati. It completely unraveled. So he has yet to, do it this year. He had the one moment last year against the Raiders, kind of playing with house money at the time. Like, that wasn't, they were going to the playoffs. It was about seeding or whatever, but it was really it felt like, I would imagine if we look back, like, his only comeback, because most of the games they've won with him have been ass kickings in the regular season. I mean, he's been a part of a lot of ass kickings, which you get credit for as a player.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and Fred said this after they were losing, like, that's not normal NFL. Like, Hurts is playing in a lot of normal NFL games, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, so it leads me to the question I was going to ask you. Here's where I'm at with Brock, because you brought up, like, the stats, and last year, can he do it again? And I still think we got to wait and see, like, kind of how all the efficiency numbers in the end, the touchdown interceptions, he didn't throw any, and then he threw them in bunches. What does he do late in games? All that stuff. But in terms of waiting for defenses to do something that he's not going to be ready for, or waiting for somebody to hit him in the mouth so many times that he backs down, or waiting for him to look overwhelmed, I'm good with him there. Like, there's still a long way to go before you're a franchise quarterback. But in terms of just proving, like, it wasn't, not the efficiency part of it, but just him belonging in the NFL wasn't a fluke. I do think he has proven he belongs. Like, that part's not a fluke with him. What do you think?
I agree.
Jury's not still out for you?
No, totally agree. The character stuff, the character is the wrong way to put it. The intangible football stuff. I think this is why I think he has a lot in common, honestly, with Dak and with obviously with Jalen, is you kind of knew right away, like, the wiring from football competitiveness. Doesn't mean it's always going to work, but you feel very good about the player handling shit, right? In the huddle, locking in, not being overwhelmed. Doesn't mean that the result is going to be great, but I think he passes that test with flying colors. I think the NFC actually has a lot of that, right? Like, say what you want, Jared Goff's got a lot of fucking, like, mental toughness. He's got some Alex Smith level stuff. Jalen, what he's overcome in terms of just getting benched, having to beat out Carson, just it's right mindset. Dak has been, a high level guy from the jump. So it's just, that's what you're dealing with. And Cousins, another guy that I think Minnesota proved, like, hell, they might make the playoffs still, but, like, he brings a lot of that to the table. Like, the NFC is less about, like, are they some of the greatest players we've ever seen? And more just, like, incredible stories. Obviously Jalen now is rich, and Dak's rich, and Cousins is rich, but their story is a lot different than, like, yeah, Mahomes first year starting, he won the MVP. Yeah, Joe Burrow, greatest college season ever, got to the pros by the second year, he's got the Bengals in the Super Bowl. Fucking superstar. Josh Allen couldn't hit water from a boat. 3 years in, it's like, yeah, this might be the second best quarterback in the league. Everyone's constantly chalking shit about the NFC guys. Like, Dak sucks. Cousins is a bum on prime time. Jalen, most people like myself thought he was a running back. Brock Purdy, are you fucking kidding me? The NFC's got a lot of, like, similar stories in a weird way. A lot of mid-round picks, right? I mean, Jalen, of the guys, I guess Jared was the number 1 overall pick, but Jalen second rounder, Dak fourth, Cousins 4th, Purdy 7th. I mean, it's not a lot of just from the jump. The building's yours.
Well, I mean, Cousins. Did you say Cousins?
I said, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll add one to that. Sounds crazy though. I've got respect for Baker's career. He's on his 4th team in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. He played for the Browns.
Well, I mean, his last year, he's checked about 3 of them, right?
3 teams. Yep. It hasn't gone well. It's been a failure from a draft pick perspective, but I think sometimes there's guys in his position that just kind of shut it down. He's thrown 116 touchdowns and 69 picks. This year, he's 14 touchdowns and 5 picks, 65%. He's already thrown for over 2,000 yards. I mean, he's not going to look, you're not going to look up and he will have fulfilled kind of the hopes and dreams people had for him. But you are going to look up, it feels like, and Baker will have just played for, I don't know.
I think he resurrected his career this year for sure.
Well, do you think somebody's going to make him a starter next year?
No, but when I say resurrect his career, like he's got another 5, 6, 7 years, kind of that fringe moment. Bad team can do this. Good team. Like you don't think like Andy Reid or the Bills or, hey, $3-4 million to be my backup.
I've developed some respect for Baker. I got to tell you, I really have.
This is what I'm saying. I think we talked about it yesterday with Kyler. We just mature at later years. And I think some of these guys from high that were now Baker, unlike Kyler, wasn't a super high pick. But once you become a star in college, you start getting at the colleges these guys go to, you start getting treated like a superstar.
You mean he wasn't a high recruit?
He wasn't a high recruit. Had to walk on multiple places. But by the time he left Oklahoma, he was kind of anointed. Heisman, just had been a star there for several years, #1 overall pick, and kind of helped the Browns get back going. And then it kind of derailed. But what I'm saying is,
his 3rd year,
and they beat the Steelers in the playoffs.
26 touchdowns, 8 picks.
I watch him though, and I think backup. And when I say backup, I don't mean like right now he's probably somewhere between 20 and 30, but you can't have guy 20 and 30 and be a good team. So like if he was the 10th guy, not the 23rd guy, they would not be 4 and 5. They would be 6 and 3. Because they, like Kyle said on the press conference, like they've been in a lot of tight games, right? Like part of, like you watch the Raiders, you're like, or the Jets, a lot of teams are just, if we just have the 14th best quarterback, those 2 losses that make us, 3 and 5, we're 5 and 3. So that's what the league comes down to. So like the difference in the 49ers, they've gotten really good quarterback play 80% of the time. Honestly, like 90% of the time. His shitty quarterback play just came on inopportune times. Like you can't be 50-50. Like the Saints, I've watched a lot of Cards. Like he's playing closer to the Baker style than he is what I think they paid him to be, which was at the bottom tier of the Dak, Cousins. And what's crazy is this, we talk about the improving or not improving. Dak's just been, I think considered by most people a better player than Cousins, but like Cousins just kept getting better. And both of them, like they're just good. Like they keep getting better. They never feel, they have bad games, but they never feel like they're getting shittier. And that's what like Jimmy, Derek, like, I'm sorry, Bob, you're not in that tier anymore. You're paid like it still. I mean, Jimmy's a fucking backup now. Would you rather have Jimmy or Baker? Assuming that Baker is like, clearly got his head on straight and a good guy now.
Baker. It seems like Jimmy, Jimmy's starting to like pay attention when he's not in the game is the story, helping out, keeping an eye on things. The Niners felt like he didn't stay engaged at a certain point, which separate story.
I know, but that gets back to when the whole mercenary situation with him on the side and the way it was like playing out with the trade and we're only going to get when you start doing that, the other side doesn't just get to be like, well, I'm all in no matter what. You can just treat me like just an asset, float me out here, and I'll be cool no matter what. I'll die for you. If you're going to die, I'm going to die too, Matt Rule style. So like the Niners kind of signed up for that, would be my take.
The counter
it's hard for me to complain about him not doing everything to come back from an injury. Like, yeah, he's kind of checked out. Welcome to life.
The counter to that is he doesn't have to do it for them. But if it's true that he could have maybe gotten himself back and ready by the end of the season or by the postseason, then he potentially cost himself a chance to trot onto the field in the NFC Championship game be the superhero that helps the Niners get to the Super Bowl and play in another Super Bowl. And I don't know. I mean, there are some people around the Niners that think that Jimmy could have gotten himself back. I don't know that he could have.
But he had to get surgery when he signed the Raiders contract.
I understand, but that's to pass a physical to sign. That's different than are you good enough to play, right?
What if he knew that, like, hey, this could go? Like, why is it worth it?
He might have. Yep, he might have. But I'm just saying, in the scenario we're talking about, which is, could he have gotten himself back on the field? And I understand what you're saying. What you're describing is a very real world human thing. Like, hey, you treat me like shit, I'm not going to work my ass off to get back on the field for you. That's fine. Like, it's business. I get it. I'm worried about my career, not about your team. I'm just saying, in that scenario, you kind of cut off your nose to spite your face, right? It's like, hey, I'm not going to do it for you guys. I'm not going to do it for you guys. Well, it wouldn't have been for them. It would have been him jogging onto the field to be the superhero in the NFC.
But like, I haven't practiced. I think the other thing, it wasn't just, hey, Kyle had said something poorly. Like, it had been a kind of a 2-year running draft a guy, moved on. Like, it was bound to happen, I'd say. There's a reason most people, the moment they move on, and I said this when they kept him around, like Andy Reid just traded Alex Smith. And remember, they could have traded him, but they couldn't quite get enough because the physical. It's like, well, you guys are playing with fire. And then, like, they get their perfect world, they get him back for $5 million, and then it kind of went. Like, for example,
they took advantage of his situation, right? That's
how and he was like, whatever. But like, you don't have an all-in guy. Like right now, if Sam Darnold or something like that happened, that would be a dark cloud on his career that he couldn't shake. Like, I think a lot of people would go like, yeah, I mean, I understand. Like the 49, it was a fucked up situation all the way around. Like the Niners get blamed for creating the weirdness, I guess, is what I would say. I'm not giving them full blame. I'm just saying, like, they split responsibility. Like, I can't just say, like, Jimmy's a slap.
Yeah, you can't ask. I can't ask for your total loyalty. Right?
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
And I understand. I think that's legitimate. I'm just saying,
I was loyal, helped out Trey, and then I was ready to go when you needed me, and then I broke my foot for you.
Yeah. He put his body on the line repeatedly for them. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just saying, in the end, if he could have played in that game and gotten himself back in that game and been available for that game, it wouldn't have been for Kyle. It would have been one of the greatest moments of his own career.
Hot take, like the version that Jimmy had kind of become.
It was better than it was a one-score game with Josh Johnson.
Yeah, it was better, but I mean, I don't think they beat the Eagles with Jimmy Garoppolo over every series but the first. I would take the Eagles with Jimmy Garoppolo not having practice or whatever. Obviously, you would rather have him than what they had.
Yeah.
But would you have picked, if I told you right now, scenario, Jimmy comes in, he had just kind of practiced that week, they beat the Eagles in Philly in that situation?
Were they going to beat the Eagles with the quarterback they had? Were they going to beat the Eagles with Brock Purdy healthy? I mean, I know, like, that'll be for another time, but like,
he would give them the best chance. Obviously.
Of course he would. But like the idea, like, I think the Niners are going to walk into Philly like, we got a target. We're here to right the wrong. Philly's got a target on the Niners. They are annoyed and tired of hearing the Niners talk about basically how they got unlucky in Philadelphia. I know that feels like it was over and done with, but that's going to come back in 2 weeks. And
well, who do you think is going to bring it up nonstop to the team? And if they win, it's going to come out that all Sirianni did was show clips of that, because for 2 months, that's all they talked about.
Yep.
And mainly the main guy. I mean, Debo talked about it nonstop. So he's got a target on his back in that game. Now, those guys can't cover him, right? But I'm just saying, like, they use that as a whole team. Like that, Jason Kelce gets to use that. Lane Johnson gets to use that. A.J. Brown. Like, the whole squad gets to use that motivation of, like, one of, if not their best player, thinks you guys aren't as good as them. Like, even though you beat them fair and square, like you KO'd their quarterback. Part of knocking out the quarterback is like part of the sport, right?
Right. He didn't get hurt tripping off the bus. Your premier pass rusher beat their guy and got to him.
To me, it's different of like, Purdy had broke his ankle the week before. We were winning the game late. We didn't have him for the whole game. No, like, we fucked him up. Remember when you're back up, you're going to have who do you think's on that side now? So you don't have two Trent Williams still. Like, whoever you're blocking on the other side where Reddick is going to be some combination of, if it's not Kittle, McKivitz, and whoever, if it's your backup tight end, right? I think the Eagles like their chances in terms of like that matchup hasn't changed over there.
Kyle's going to start the game with a 7-step drop.
He might.
Just to prove a point.
And listen, I think the Niners, when they're playing well, are better than the Eagles. But I do think the Eagles are going to get an easy BP fastball with the motivation. They've saved that.
Yeah. Yep. The Niners don't get to be the motivated ones for that game. Maybe they will be. Maybe they'll be motivated, but they don't get to act like the wronged ones.
I bet that's a huge point of just conversation that week. Philly bring it up.
Oh, yeah.
We feel like the underdogs because they don't respect us.
Right.
I mean, they don't. Debo's said they sucked. I mean, Debo's like, yeah, they can't cover anybody. Like, his words weren't just like, hey, we could. Listen, totally understandable. Like, they were pretty specific. They were never going to be able to cover us. He kept saying that. It's not like, hey, we thought, we got the advantage here. Like, they can't cover us. Darius Slay still, their guys are still there.
Pass
We're going to
rush.
find out. Now, Bradbury has struggled, but it's easy to talk about the Eagles game when you're playing the Bucs.
You want to hear this? So Tim Kawakami said on his podcast today, John, that when the Habram and the Middlecoff podcast hits his feed, it's an immediate listen. So I'm going to play something for you from his show. You tell me if what you think of this.
He presses them. There's no. I mean, I'll just say generally.
Let me reset it back up here. He's talking about Kyle Shanahan.
There's no. I mean, I'll just say generally. He presses everybody. They talk about it. John kind of has to calm it down. And I think sometimes, if you read into John saying, "I might not do this a long time," it's because of how much he has to do to calm everybody. He had it he's told me sometimes he had to come down there multiple times when Saleh and Shanahan were ready to go. Not fight, but they were not getting along because Kyle, he is on these guys and on the players. But I think the players respect that. Might that not last 20 years? Yeah.
It goes on and on, but then my voice popped in, and so I edited that out.
Who would you like in the fight?
Saleh, Kyle?
Yeah.
I mean, I got to think Shanahan you would have to put Shanahan on an ambulance to get him to stop fighting.
Well, he'd bite, he'd scratch. He would, Saleh would just hit you like Chuck Liddell or something. I feel like I think Kyle would ball grabs, penis.
Draymond, you call him Draymond.
Yeah, no, I mean, Draymond, what Draymond would do if the NBA was the big three, if there were he could do whatever he wanted. Prison rules. That's how I feel Kyle would fight because he'd be at a big disadvantage.
So when I texted you that clip today, you said what?
Well, two things. I didn't tell you this, but I do think the first couple years were pretty ugly. Robert Saleh was a pretty big stretch a defensive coordinator at the time, given that I don't think he had other options to be a defensive coordinator. I think they'd kind of struck out on some other DCs. And it was ugly. I mean, they were terrible. And I think they had one win before Jimmy showed up, and he didn't start playing until December. I mean, they were god-awful. And that second year, he tears his ACL a couple games into the season, and they were, again, very, very shitty, which led to Nick Bosa, meaning they had the number 2 overall pick. So when you're really crappy in the NFL, and you're not happy-go-lucky guy, and even happy-go-lucky guy on the outside, Andy or Pete Carroll, between the buildings during the week, you're working long hours. People are on edge. I think it's a very tense situation. The other factor is, now, obviously, this was a 4-year stretch if we're talking about Robert Saleh, but I think those first 2 years were probably really, really difficult because it got pretty good after year 2, right, on defense. So he wasn't going to be screaming at them when they're fucking 8-0. I do think Kyle, first-time head coach. Naturally, you hear McVay and Saleh and those guys talk about him, or even LaFleur when he was the OC at Washington. He's clearly tightly wound. I could imagine it was just really tense. But I do think the NFL and football in general is just I think if you walked into any Power 5 program who is struggling or even successful, I've heard stories. I know a lot of people that have worked for Nick Saban while they won national championships. It's not fucking hunky dory every day. You think it's a lot of people are smiling at USC. I bet Michigan, Ohio State, these are intense Oregon. Like it's just an intense environment. Now in college, you usually maybe have like the director of football who's kind of the intermediary. In the NFL, I bet a lot of time it is a GM, that kind of plays like we need to calm down. We need to, because you're not living as a GM. Your stresses are different, right? You're not coaching the players. You're not putting the game plan. When things fuck up, it's not really your fault. I mean, a player might not be good enough. So you get to play kind of this unique role. But I don't think it's that. It sounds kind of crazy. And Tim's mentioned this before. Kind of that's John's role. But I think that's kind of the NFL, man. I think we speak about it more because those guys aren't like cloak and dagger. Like Bell. What do you think happens in New England? I'm not talking now they suck, but when they were good. I just don't think it's that abnormal in football to just be a tense. I mean, I work for Andy Reid, and it's just you're kind of you just standing up straight, head on when you were losing for sure. Winning, it's natural. Everyone's a little happier. That's the whole point of the sport. When you're losing, and remember they lost the fourth year too. Like after the Super Bowl, it was pretty ugly. But they were better on defense. It was more the offense's fault.
Yeah,
I guess my point is I think it sounds a little crazier than it actually is in practice in the sport.
I believe you. I think you're probably right. But I also think it highlights this specific dynamic because Kyle, if I told you 25 years from now, is Kyle still 20 years from now? Is Kyle Shanahan still coaching football? You'd go, yeah. Is John Lynch still a GM of an NFL team? I wouldn't think for a second that John Lynch is still a GM of an NFL team, right? Kyle's found himself a pretty unique partner in John Lynch. Not just a guy that hadn't done it, but that he believed in. But for John, I mean, think about like the situation Mike Mayock had to take on. He took on a situation with a totally in control head coach who was an offensive play caller, who clearly respected him. He hired him. Mayock was well respected around the NFL, but he was not about, it doesn't seem like, to let Mike not manipulate him, but Mike you couldn't possibly have the stature that John Lynch has as it relates to Kyle. I mean, Kyle's dad coached the guy. Kyle grew up as a kid when this guy was on a team. I was texting you earlier, like, John Lynch is one of Kyle's football heroes. The stature that John has with Kyle is going to be really hard to replicate with whoever has to one day replace John Lynch in this organization.
Well, I would say, Kyle, if you remember, got a start in Tampa Bay with Gruden. I don't know if John Lynch might have been gone by then, but usually, obviously, if he was gone, he was with Kyle's dad. That when you have a guy like John Lynch still had years left when Denver signed him. Like I would say, when you think John Lynch's Hall of Fame career, you think Tampa Bay, right? Team captain, Bucs.
Yep.
But he was still a good player for the Broncos. But usually when you get a guy who's still got something left, that especially with a legendary coach, that coaches always love that guy. He's just, when you're a great player, like you're not available. Like Andy got Alex Smith. I'm not saying Alex was as good as John Lynch, not a Hall of Famer. But like Andy had loved him for 7-8 years. So you just get the opportunity. Well, what makes it unique is I think Mike and Kyle look at football exactly the same. How many times, like if Kyle was in junior high or high school, just like, Dad, you got to get John Lynch. Or maybe Mike's like, I fucking love John Lynch. You should see this guy on film, son. And there's no chance that they didn't have those conversations, right? And I do think John would have respect no matter what. Like comparing John to Mike Mayock, who TV personality had made it to the NFL. But John was a legendary NFL player. Just a legendary, I would just say, person in football. There's not many, just the casual sports fan that is, 35 to 60 years old. Like you say John Lynch, it's just, it'd be like saying, I don't even know who, just
Zach Thomas.
Yeah, but there are certain, but I was just going to go like other sports, Gary Payton or, he was just a staple famous guy in a sport.
Yeah.
Just baseball players like, I don't know, fucking Jay Buhner. That's not even good enough. Like he's a Hall of Famer, like Derek Jeter, whoever. But you just say his name. That Derek Jeter's more famous, but you know what I mean. He He was a
Robbie
very
Alomar.
very, very famous player. Feels like even higher than that.
Higher than Robbie Alomar? Jim Thome.
Because part of it, yeah, he's an American player too.
Mark Teixeira.
Yeah, bigger.
Um,
Because it'd be someone in the 90s, so they were just way more famous than like
Frank
Mark
Thomas?
Teixeira.
Too famous.
Too famous, but similar dual sport athlete. I just think
Kirby
like
Puckett.
John Lynch, played for Bill Walsh. I think that John Lynch, the moment they win a Super Bowl, like dealing with this, like I do think John Lynch likes being in the trenches because you don't stay if you don't like being in the trenches.
Yeah.
I didn't care that much about being in the trenches, but I didn't play fucking NFL football. I didn't play college football. Like I listened to some of Pat Burrell. He KNBR had him on, the new hitting coach for Bob. I mean, Pat Burrell is rich. He is a notorious playboy. Yet when I heard him talking to Murph and Mac, just talking about like already reaching out to guys, like that guy's a junkie. Like he really likes
Well, he
baseball.
was scouting for. I remember seeing him in a college baseball game, and I heard like I think he got married. Kind of things calmed down from that perspective. He was like scouting, like beating the bushes. Right? You did that. Like it's not for the unfocused and the unmotivated.
But clearly, once he got a little taste of it, he really liked it. Right?
Yeah.
Because he wanted more. Now John got to skip steps just to become the coolest part of the job.
Because of other work that he'd done, earned it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know. To me, like GMs and coaches sometimes complain. I don't even know if earned. He got an opportunity, and he's equipped, right? And
well, for this job, he's got the right skill set.
Yeah, and what did he do immediately? He brought in guys that have been GMs and another guy that apprenticed under Elway and Belichick. So he immediately did not act like, oh, well, I know all the players to pick. I got Adam Peters, who had came up the scouting way with big-time teams and won Super Bowls, and Martin Mayhew that he had also played in the league but had like worked his way into a scout and become a GM. So like he immediately just surrounded himself, with guys that know what they're doing. But I guess my point is because I listened to John with Tim, whatever, a week or two back after the bye week, and he mentioned like I'm not going to say never. I think you come this far, like I want to win a Super Bowl. I did this to win a Super Bowl. I won a Super Bowl as a player. I'm in the Hall of Fame. I won a Super Bowl as a GM. Like I'd be I don't think he's doing it. Like ultimately that stuff's kind of hollow, but I've already come this far. I've already worked the hours when we were shitty in the number 2 pick. We've been close. I think once you win a Super Bowl, you would be nervous that he could go at any moment. I'm not saying he would. Maybe he gets a taste. Like, why can't I win 2?
Well, if they won this year, would that be the year to walk away?
That assumes that like he's already really thought about it. Because it doesn't feel like did he come that close to Amazon? Because it feels like they wanted him and he didn't really.
It feels like you put so much money in front of somebody, they've got to take your phone call and take
exactly. I feel like McVay came way closer than John, right?
Yeah, I mean McVay's thinking about is actively talking about leaving. Kind of proactive. No one brought it up, right? He proactively talks about not wanting to coach forever.
Feels like
Lynch was out of the game. Like it's different because Lynch was out of the game. Like Lynch came back for the drug, right? John came back for it. I don't see how if you win a championship this year with 2-year in the league, Brock Purdy, how do you walk away now to go, especially after you've watched say what you want. You watch the Amazon show. That could have been you. You're like, no, this is Thursday Night Football, Panthers, Bears. No, Niners GM.
Yeah. Well, Herb Street is not.
But
Herb
it's not even about
be on
that.
Amazon for 5 years, right?
Yeah,
they're going to have a new guy, so they're going to keep throwing money around. Al's adamant that he's coming back, but they're just going to be enormous players. Like that seat is just going to open up, and they're not going to not come back after the big names. Right? They would still want Sean McVay. If John Lynch were to win a Super Bowl, make a lot of sense. I mean, those two guys still make a ton of sense. Like it's hard to get better than that. I saw Kawakami was tweeting about it. Jason Kelsey, because they're like promoting the Amazon show or whatever, they had their bye week and was in the booth with Herb Street and Al Michaels. Were you watching last week when he was in the booth?
No.
And people were like, is he going to be in that seat next year? Like when he retires? And he'd be good. But like he would be a guy that would make sense, right? Big famous name. But they had the chance to do that this year with like Richard Sherman or whatever. They went with, or 2 years ago, they went with Herb Street.
We'll see next year if Brady really does go work for Fox, right, on the number 1 game or not. What does Olsen do? But
I would feel. See, I don't think if you're Amazon, you're saying like, do you hire just Greg Olsen?
Yeah. Not knowing, I don't know what his contract. Maybe he's under contract. I don't know.
Part of Tom Brady, to me, it's like he still feels really famous when he does shit and gets to do whatever he wants. He's just, I would bet, it feels like he's going to call games every Sunday.
That's what I said when it happened. I'm with you. And if you're Greg, like, let's say you had that opportunity. If you're Greg, do you go to the number 2 crew, hang around? Maybe Tom shuts it down in 2 years and you're back on the Super Bowl, right? Amazon doesn't have a Super Bowl. Like when you stay with Fox or CBS or NBC, maybe he replaces, but like you get to do the Super Bowl. I think that's a pretty big deal for those guys. How could it not be?
I feel like Tom is still several years away from losing a lot of the shine and the fame that part of the reason he would go do that is for. I still feel like he's really, really famous and part of conversation and just if he says something, like if he said something right now, just tweeted something about Belichick and the Patriots, like it'd be the biggest story in football, right? Like had a legit take. Like, yeah, I don't even know what he would say, but like actually talk like a human, not like some corporate being. Or let's just say he was.
Yeah, Robert Kraft would be crazy to let Bill go.
Exactly. Like was on record, like one of the Athletic guys or Mike Reese, like just went on record and talked about the current state of the Patriots. It would be the biggest story tomorrow in football. Like gave legit quotes. Or I think it's time for, I think he's lost his fastball. I could tell he was losing it. Like it just had so to me, that shows you like his power is still really strong. And I don't think he just needs money. But ultimately, I guess what I'm saying here is Tom is so recent in the trenches. Like John had been away for a while, right? Retires 07, 08, goes to TV. I think TV, when you've done it, if you're him, especially doing like the numbers, it's probably just got boring. And they often say it, like coaches and players, like I don't win or lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing for him to get that juice, which he craves. Some guys don't want that, right? Like you watch Greg Olsen, I think he likes it. Some guys are natural media guys. That's my big issue with the media in general, with former coaches and players. Like you're not even, why are you doing this? Like when Drew Brees got hired to NBC, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. What like Peyton Manning is
feel like you want to be there, right? You watch Peyton, you're like, Peyton wants to be doing this right now. It comes
exactly
the skin.
But you could tell watching Peyton when he was a player and would get going. You're like, Phillip Rivers, who just doesn't want to do it. But if he did, he'd be awesome. Some guys are like, this is never going to work.
Right.
Never. Like Jason Garrett. Like it just doesn't work. It does not work.
He does work though for a lot of money per year for several years.
Who?
Sure. Jason Garrett. He is currently working for NBC, getting paid a lot of money. Scott said Mac Jones has lost as many home games as Brady did in his entire career. I've not seen that stat. Brady did have CJ Stroud on his Let's Go podcast, and he bet CJ one of his Super Bowl rings on the Ohio State-Michigan game this week. I don't know what CJ gives him, but
he took Michigan.
Yeah. Bosa and Chase Young. I wonder if they both have bad blood for Baker this week. Something to watch for. Baker may not survive if those two guys. Did you see there was a photo I tweeted? I don't know if you saw it. It was Hargrave, Chase Young, and Bosa all sacking Trevor Lawrence, which I think was the fumble play. And I just looking at it going, that's a 300. Bosa's 170. Hargrave's 80. Rookie contract for Chase Young's 35, but what's he about to get? What do you think? What's the floor on Chase Young's next contract, you think?
He's a fascinating one.
It's not 50, maybe guaranteed, but just like the total value, right? Like Hargrave's guarantee wasn't 80, but that's the total value of his 4-year contract. 40 guaranteed? Depends how it looks.
Hargrave was, it depends how it looks. I think that injury thing scares teams. It's like, well, McGlinchey just got 4 or 5 for 80 and 50 guaranteed, but you're like, the one thing McGlinchey had is he was kind of reliable. I don't know. He's a pass rusher. Maybe someone gives him 4 years, $100 million.
Yeah, I mean, so it's
$50-60 million.
The point is like
it's
it's a $300+ million group when those three guys tackle you. Not to mention Armstead. As it is, it's a $285 million group just based on the money that is committed to them on paper or they have earned already. So like when you go like, well, I don't know, Kyle's got to get this offense going. It starts with you said it, you've said it. So I'm not breaking ground here. Other people have said it. It does start with that group of guys. Like they play from ahead because of those guys. They get after the quarterback, they get off the field on third down, they create turnovers, and they play from ahead with those dudes. Why are you grinning?
Someone's making fun of my Lynchy comments. Reliable in terms of he's on the field.
He was reliable. You knew what you were getting.
Let's replace reliable with available.
Predictable,
available. Reliable would be like, Christian McCaffrey's reliable. Juszczyk is reliable. Yeah. Availability and reliability are not the same things.
That's right. So my car is in the driveway. It's available to me, but if it doesn't start, or if it might break down, it's not reliable. I like that. You got any picks for this weekend? You see there's 3 top 10. There's 3 college games this week that are ranked against ranked, and 2 of them are in the Pac-12. And one of them is Utah, Arizona. The other one is Oregon State, Washington. And then like K-State, Kansas is the other.
Because USC and UCLA neither are ranked anymore.
That's right.
It's a bad week because usually to me Thanksgiving week is like one of the best college football weeks of the year. Because it's always the rivalry week.
Oh yeah.
It's like Oregon State, Washington State, Auburn, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. It's pretty incredible couple week stretch because that week then right into the championship week.
Yep.
Because those games, I mean, especially if 2 of the teams are good, are just incredible theater. Because I heard someone talking about it. The thing college has is, part of rivalries as they get broken up, as these conferences change, is like the Apple Cup doesn't really matter. Obviously, it's better if they're both 10-win teams. But if one team sucks, the game is still really matters to the consumer, right? Yeah. I mean, best case scenario, you get what Ohio State, Michigan has been this week. But like Oregon and Oregon State, now that's a bad example too because they're both good. But Auburn, Alabama does not, even though a scout had told me that like the one problem with Alabama is most players, especially with the transfer portal and everything, now view like LSU as the rival. Like they don't even like it. In fairness, like why would you view Auburn? But I mean, Auburn is their rival. But like it's like they view Auburn like they would Mississippi State or something. I honestly haven't even really looked at the slate.
The NFL slate. If you're listening to this before Thursday night, Bengals Ravens Thursday, Sunday Seahawks. Vikings Broncos. Broncos could be 5-5 with a win at home.
Yeah, that's Sunday night football, I think.
Sunday night football, and then Monday night's Eagles Chiefs.
Who does Seattle play?
Seattle plays at the Rams.
That's a win.
Raiders at Dolphins. We talked about that game on our Raiders.
Big game for
on our
Antonio.
Raiders pod, which you can subscribe to.
Who is Nick Zajecki?
Niners lineman?
I don't know. People keep just saying torn bicep. I don't even know who this is. Never heard of the guy.
You missed camp, John. You didn't have your depth chart out there like me.
Torn bicep, what? Playing lifting?
Yeah, I didn't. When I saw that news, I was like, how many snaps? Have you watched more than 5 minutes of the Packers this year? I'm not sure that I have. They play the Chargers this week.
Yeah, because I played on Monday Night Football, but I haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, I've watched a decent amount.
Sneaky game this week, Jets Bills.
That's a big one.
I've been in on the Jets all year, John. They play a lot of close games. And on national television. That's probably why I've been in on them. Are the Cardinals about to go on a little run here?
Who do they play?
Texans.
I don't know.
Anyway, one last thing. I forgot about this before we go. Somebody was talking some shit to us. Hold on, let me find it. Here we go. from our last show. Let me get this up. Stand by so you can see it. Is this it? Nope, that's just a picture of John. Hold on. Getting there. Here's coming. Hold on. I'm not even going to edit the silence out of the podcast. Who the fuck is this? Here we go. Sean, I don't even know what this. Dean says, this is from the last pod, John. He says, did you guys really say, quote, I think Jerry Rice probably owns the all-time TD record on the air, and you recorded it, and you let everybody hear it? Question mark. Yeah, we don't fake it around here. Stupid stuff doesn't get edited out. And
we were right.
Yeah, we were right. But his point is like, did you really like say, I think he probably has the record instead of just knowing Jerry's record like the back of your own hand? And we don't apologize, John. We make no apologies. I just wanted to take that head on, acknowledge it, and I not care.
My other take would be on big picture. Jerry Rice hasn't played in the league in 20 plus years, and records in football specifically, you could argue just records in sports in general, I would say are way less powerful than they've ever been to the casual sports fan. Like when we were kids, the version of us at 40 years old talking about football or basketball or definitely baseball in like 1993. If we were 40 years old in 1993, it's a huge part of the conversation. I've never talked to anybody now and talk about, unless like McCaffrey, the game's going on, you're discussing it. No one discusses records, numbers anymore like that. Which is kind of ironic because the analytical movement is very strong. But that's a good example of if you just went to a diehard football fan and say, how many touchdowns Jerry Rice have in his career and who's top 3 all-time touchdowns? Maybe they would get, throw fucking shit at the wall and hope it would stick. But besides Jerry Rice, no one would get it. I just don't think like this isn't the historian podcast. Not even getting mad at this guy. My point is that I don't think any of that's relevant. Like when I used to listen to Chris Russo, he used to pound the table like no one even knows the history. It's one thing to know the history of like who was good and stuff. I don't think records matter at all if you're just talking about sports. And again, we were right. We said he probably has the record. That came out, and he does.
Yeah, we were right. John, let's see. Can you get, for people listening, if you're watching, you can see the list. Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Tito, Chris Carter 4, Marvin Harrison 5.
But like all-time touchdowns, if you factor in rushing,
instead of
receiving? Because that's what I brought up. It's like,
oh, okay,
he has 208, and no one has any more. Emmett has 175. So it's like Emmett and LaDainian Tomlinson 175. Like he blows everyone out of the water. Like a top 20 is like Barry Sanders has 109. So yeah, I mean Jerry has it. But again, like Jerry Rice is very famous, obviously, just an all-time famous athlete / in the Bay Area is one of the greatest athletes of all time. If you just start asking, people go, God, he had some historic numbers. How many people that our podcast listenership is between 45 and 30? Like again, he has not played in 20 years. 20 years. It's a long fucking time. 20. We were in high school when he was on the Raiders. High school. I'm not far away from 40 years old. He's a lot older. Sometimes when I see him with the 49er chain, like he's a lot older than you realize when you factor in. He still looks good, but like he's been gone for a long time of playing football. Like some of those guys, like Randy Moss, was on Jim Harbaugh's 49er team, which is still a long time ago, but it's not that long ago.
Right. The thing that always stands out to me when I look at one of these old lists is when you see like Jim Brown finished playing football in 1965 and is still top 10 all time in NFL touchdowns. John Riggins, top 15, hasn't played football since the year I was born, since 85. Right? Like those are the guys that always kind of jump off of these lists to me.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Would you have picked Jerome Bettis for top 30?
I just
tied
think
with Priest Holmes and Marshawn Lynch.
I think if you played in the 80s and 90s and you were a good running back, you got a lot of touchdowns. You were just scoring a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like it took Randy Moss. Like wide receivers, there aren't that many wide receivers on that list, you notice, that are old. There wasn't like some great 1980s wide receiver boom.
Right.
Chris Carter was playing in the 90s. Harrison 2000s.
My guess. So when Steve Largent retired,
Lenny Moore. That's who. I think that's who.
Oh,
Christian
yeah.
McCaffrey was chasing.
Spats was his nickname. 9th overall pick in the 56th draft. You're right, John. This is the guy. 56th draft. Gary Glick went 1. Don't make those names like they used to. Joe Marconi.
What a group.
Tex Schreier. Old names. We just don't name people like we used to. Tex. All right. Spats.
I wonder what the age is on the guy that sent us that tweet. Because honestly, if the guy's 60 years old or 55 years old, I don't totally understand it. Which is never underestimate that on Twitter. Sometimes guys older than you think. I get that in my Instagram DMs.
Yeah.
You can never just think it's a 23-year-old.
23-year-olds
aren't on Twitter.
I said something about Montana the other day. And I got multiple messages from guys who are like, I watched Montana. And it wasn't like controversial. It was just like, let me tell you what people thought about Montana in 83. Like, fuck I want to hear.
That's what
Tell
I'm saying.
Me, please.
I have no issue with that guy if he's 56 years old. Because if you experience it, right, it's like someone says, wait, you just said Tiger Woods might be good at golf? You know, it'd be something in 20 years. It's like, well, that guy never saw him play. It says when me and you were going to interview Dan Marino and we pulled up YouTube, we're like, holy fuck.
Like we knew, but we didn't know.
It's like, I can't talk. Like you meet a guy that was a big basketball fan that like was in the 80s. They'll be like, Larry Bird. Larry Bird? Are you ever discredit his name? Larry Bird wouldn't hang. It's why they get so offended when the JJ Redicks and shit start talking shit. They're like, shut your fucking mouth, bro. That guy would dominate.
Kuzi?
The Kuzi thing was crazy, but it feels like they kind of jump the shark sometime with Kuzi and try to include like a Larry Bird type. Or if anyone does it with quarterbacks, like, yeah, you know, it's Dan Marino. People are like, it's full stop.
Right. Yep. All right. On that note, anything else to add?
Nope.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging. Later.